welcome to Love and the Planets for the week of October 1st, 2018. It's a particularly exciting week because Venus is stationing to go retrograde, and I'm Armand Diaz from the greater New York area in California.
And in California, yes, you're still on your travels, Armand, and I'm Margaret Gray in a very sunny Dublin. As you can see, we've got an exceptionally sunny, warm day, which is a real treat, the end of September, beginning of October. So what a week, Armand. I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, really, Venus going retrograde, and now here she is actually going retrograde. And it's not just the importance of her going retrograde, but she's going retrograde in the sign of Scorpio, which of course is all about, themes like passion, intensity, at its most expansive, but also at its most limited, can also bring up feelings of obsessiveness, of jealousy, of control issues. So there's really going to be an awful lot going on with this Venus retrograde. Also, I wanted to mention that unlike Mercury, who goes retrograde very regularly, Venus doesn't go retrograde that often. So this is really an incredibly important time for relationships. What are your thoughts?
Well, the thing about Venus retrograde we're always saying is that it's going back to past relationships and reconnecting, which is often the case. Sometimes people just show up to say hi or sometimes to resolve past issues and sometimes to really reconnect. So there's a lot of questions there. It is, though, in Scorpio where I feel that, it is going to be especially intense. If you have a good memory, you might look back to 2010 when Venus retrograded almost exactly the same place in the zodiac. So maybe you can look back to what was happening then for some clues as to how this is going to play out.
And even going further back to 2002 as well may be worthwhile, just to see what were your patterns in relationships at that time, because I think astrology is so much about patterns. Cycles come around and we almost get a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance to redo certain things that maybe we weren't totally happy with when they happened originally. So this retrograde is very important because in Scorpio, we're talking about intimacy. We're talking about connection on a very deep 8th house intimate level. So we're talking about sexual connections here, really. This is less about friendships and more about sexual intimacy. So it's also an opportunity to look at how do we value sexual intimacy? What does it mean to us? What do those relationships, what have they brought into our life? How have we changed over the years? And what's going on in that whole area for us right now?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that this retrograde, unlike other Venus retrogrades, might be bringing up issues that are a little bit more difficult. We might be revisiting difficult relationship issues as opposed to just, relationship issues. And I think, we have to also account for the fact that Chiron has drifted back into Pisces, which can sort of amp up the emotional aspect of things in not necessarily the sweetest way possible. So, we have to kind of keep that in our minds as well, that there could be a little bit of extra emotionality, a little bit of extra sensitivity during this Venus retrograde.
Very good point, because really, if we imagine Venus as Aphrodite, the goddess Aphrodite, or any goddess that is connected with Venus, she's really diving into the underworld. So we're diving into our unconscious and digging out, what are the shadow parts of us in relationship? What parts of us maybe get a little obsessive or a little threatened, or have we had relationships where there were abuses of power, where we did feel maybe afraid in them, or maybe we were abusing our power. So what are those dynamics, those kind of Mercury dynamics that lie in the swamp, really, that we don't often want to go and clean out. Now, the good part of that is that it gives us an opportunity to clean out that swamp so that after the retrograde, we can maybe start new relationships, because that's something to mention. it's not really seen as a very good time to start a brand new relationship. It's really an ideal time, as you mentioned, to maybe revisit old relationships, maybe rekindle old relationships, but probably not an ideal time to start something brand new or to get married. That's also, certainly we do a lot of electional astrology, of course, for weddings and for engagements. And we always say to couples, really, try and avoid that time if you possibly can, unless you're getting remarried to the same person.
That would be the exception to the rule, but it's a kind of rare one. Margaret, as you were talking, it occurs to me that you're really almost describing an internal process, which is very typical for any retrograde. That, as much as we think about what's going to happen out in the world, reconnecting with people and so on, especially in Scorpio, this sounds like a very internal process. And yet, then Venus is going to retrograde back into Libra, where she's going to station and then come forward. So it seems to me to be almost sort of like wedding together the internal process with some external things. And, we're kind of getting a little bit of both during this retrograde. May start off more internally focused and wind up turning into a more, it may be later in the process there that we start to really, find that there's something happening with another person when she's in Libra.
Good point. And she's going to be in Libra from November 1st to December 2nd. So just to keep in mind that period of time. And just a quick reminder while we're talking about relationships and Venus, that of course our certificate online course is starting in January, our 1-year certificate course. And this is really a unique course. There's nothing like it in the world really at the moment. So it's a professional course. And if you'd like to sign up, please contact us pretty quickly because places are going very fast. So I just wanted to mention that, particularly with Venus going retrograde. Now, Armand, we've got otherwise, it's not such a busy week, although we do have Mercury square Pluto on Tuesday. So to be aware that we've had a lot of these Mercury transits, there's been a lot of challenges around communication, and to really keep in mind that those challenges might continue a little bit, so to go kind of gently with each other, because the Mercury square Pluto could bring up a little bit of jaggedness, a little bit of harshness, abrasiveness, also a lot of honesty though, so in a way it might also bring to light things which have been hidden before and which need to be said.
It could be a very frank conversation. We could be Mercury is in Libra, so we're hoping that it'll at least be a diplomatic delivery. That's a possibility, but the overall content may be a little prickly. So yes, that is definitely something to consider.
And the week ends with the Sun quincunx Neptune. So just after Venus goes retrograde, by the weekend, the Sun quincunx Neptune could be a little bit romantic, maybe because it's a Sun in Libra, but also could bring about some confusion, particularly with Venus stationary retrograde. So to be aware, really not to take back to really that, what we've said before, not to take anything too personally, because we're kind of in this fog and this retrograde time. And there are things which could be said or could be done that aren't quite as they are intended.
Yeah, the Sun in Libra kind of tries to keep a bit of balance, a bit of harmony, a bit of, decorum, and then that Neptunian energy has a very different feel to it. It's much more going with the emotional flow of things, and it could be just sort of like you're trying to do one thing but feeling another. With quincunxes, we're often of two minds about things, but we don't even necessarily recognize it.
And they're kind of uncomfortable, aren't they? I think there's that discomfort. It's not quite as jagged almost as the square, but it's just uncomfortable. So it's really quite an interesting week. Take care of yourselves, everybody, because there's a lot going on, just to be aware of that. And we'll probably we will definitely be posting a blog about all of this on our Facebook page about Venus going retrograde. So keep a lookout for that. And see you next week, Armand, when you're back in New York.
Yes.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.